Well, hey there, friends. It's Spramani with Nature of Art, and I wanted to pop in to talk about homeschooling art lessons without being an artist. And that's the first thing that you want to think about when you are thinking, I want to teach my kids visual arts, and you don't know where to start. One of the things that I understand is that um, most parents don't feel confident to teach their students or their children visual arts because they didn't do art when they were younger, or they didn't classify themselves as an artist, or they've never painted and drawn. And I want you to stop that. I want you to think about the idea of all the other topics that you are teaching your students. And you're not a mathematician, but you are teaching your students basic mathematics. You're not an English professor, but I don't know, maybe some of you are. But for the majority of us, we are not, you know, um, English majors, but we can teach our children the basics of reading and writing and history. We're not a history buff, or maybe some of you are, but if you don't know anything about history, you're able to get some books and get around that and learn, this the basic history lessons that you need to teach your students. So I want you to think about that with visual arts. Now, I did homeschool my kids, and I was a professional painter and illustrator, but what I discovered, and my story is written in all my art education books, is that those ideas that I got from design and fine art school did not work on teaching children. And if you need to learn more about that, I do have a lot of books you can dive into. I have some art guides for you, a homeschool art guide as well. I'll link that, and I'll put that where you can find that and check that out. But the thing is, all these skills that I had, I don't use those when I teach children how to paint and draw. In fact, they don't work. Children are developing, and they're on a different developmental, um, cognitive development and visual development, using their eyes and their visual perception and their fine motor abilities. They're on a completely different trajectory than we are as adults. So what you would actually understand in fine art school, and the way they teach visual arts doesn't work for children. So I want you to let that go and not worry about that. You do not need to be an artist to teach your children how to draw and paint. What you do need is you need an environment and a space at home to set up. You need to be able to get a hold of some art materials, and you don't need a lot. You can just pick one area. If you want to understand what visual art areas to teach, I also have a book called Defining Visual Arts, and it explains the areas that you should be focusing on. But let's give you an example. So if you want to teach your kids how to draw, that's just one area. You can go out to the art store and buy some art supplies like pencils and sketch pencils and erasers and a sketch pad, and maybe some rulers, and maybe some color mediums like color pencils or crayons. And you can teach the basics of teaching art. You can teach the basics by understanding some of the basic art elements that children need to practice first before they actually start drawing things, recognizable things like a house or a dog. So to give you another example is, in visual arts, we learn how to break down these hard lessons by teaching them basic elements, like how to do a circle, or how to do different types of geometric shapes like a square or a triangle. You can teach these basic things, and believe it or not, you're only hear this from a homeschooler. I have a lot of history with my children and a lot of friends that homeschooled. And I used to hear this term all the time, and I used to think that's just not possible. Your children will actually teach themselves when they have an interest and a love for something. So if you teach them the basics of drawing, whatever direction they want to go into, and whatever hobby or whatever interest, like let's say you have a child who loves, drawing dragons, and is so interested in them, they're going to teach themselves, and they're going to learn more about it. And you'll be able to help and give them the resources just like you do in every other area. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. If you're homeschooling, young elementary students or junior high or high school, you do not have to be a fine artist to teach them. Let me repeat that. You do not need to be a fine artist to teach them. So don't worry. I promise you, I homeschooled my kids, and I didn't know how to teach them mathematics and algebra. All I had to do was learn how to have the right resources and teach them the basics. I did not know how to teach my children how to, write great literature. I just had to teach them how to do penmanship and write their ABCs and write sentences. And, there are a lot of curriculum out there that will guide and help you do the rest. Well, I have our curriculum. So if you want to follow a step-by-step guide, I do have that available, and I will list that down at the bottom. So I hope that helps. I'd love to hear your feedback and see what you're thinking about, starting an art program with your children at home. All right, it's Spramani with Nature of Art, and I'll catch you in my next episode. Bye-bye.